Hi everyone, welcome back to Numinosophy Academy. I'm Lewis. This episode is going to be about the new documentary, Murder Among the Mormons. As always, if you do enjoy this content, please do like this video for the YouTube algorithm. So, Murder Among the Mormons has just landed on Netflix. On this channel, I don't do reviews of movies or series, but rather I primarily seem to talk about Mormonism, all things Mormonism, Mormon theology, Mormon culture, Mormon history, and so forth. And so, of course, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to discuss this new documentary. I'm not really going to give a review. I'll say it's a very compelling, well put together, super well done, true crime documentary, and if you haven't seen it yet, you should certainly, go and do so. Which is not to say I don't have my criticisms. I certainly do. So in as far as you can give spoilers for a true crime documentary, here is your warning. During this episode, I will be discussing various aspects of the mini-series. So, you'll probably just find what I have to say more interesting and more compelling if you have already seen the documentary. So, go and do that, and then come back and we can think about it. Okay, right, ready, happy to proceed. So, I suppose my first thought is that the documentary just seems to assume a hell of a lot of knowledge about Mormonism. The kind of knowledge that you would know if you were a Mormon, or you would know if you were an ex-Mormon, or you would know if you were a Mormonism geek like me, but otherwise, I think there's a lot of stuff that's assumed that I don't think the average person would know. So, for example, there's all the stuff about folklore, treasure seeking, and magic, right? All of that stuff was, of course, integral to Joseph Smith's worldview, and it, played into the formulation of the church. But the way that it's set up in the documentary is you have kind of the official LDS Church's version of things, version of history, and then you have this kind of magic Mark Hofmann version of history, right? And there's a kind of duality between the two that is set up. Even though Mormon history is totally integral to this story, a kind of true version of that history is never offered to us in the documentary, beyond having Richard Turley, who's a official LDS Church historian, give his kind of elevator pitch for the Mormon Church, which is basically what any missioner would give you if they were to knock on your door. The official account of things. Joseph Smith, Angel Moroni, finding the golden plates, translation, presto, Book of Mormon. You just have the official account on one side, and then this kind of, libelous, slanderous account given to us by Mark Hofmann. And I think, that setting up that kind of dichotomy kind of implies that those are the only two options. And of course, over the course of the three-part miniseries, the Mark Hofmann salamander letter, the Martin Harris forgery is completely debunked and discredited. And, doesn't that kind of just implicitly imply that if you have a duality and you totally, discredit this option, then it implies that this option is the correct and true version of things, that this is the true history of Mormonism. And, obviously, I know there's not really a dichotomy, and you probably know that, but I don't think your kind of average Netflix viewer would know that. It implies that there is, nothing underpinning the whole magic, folklore, treasure seeker stuff. But of course, that is integral to the church's true history. So I guess I just feel, or it seems to me, that the documentary is just really Mormon friendly. There's nothing in it which would offend true blue Mormons that I can see. And, on one level, that's, of course, fine. I don't think we should be, setting out to crap on the LDS Church. That's certainly not my goal with this channel. But at the same time, I think in not wanting to offend the LDS Church, that kind of, precludes going down certain avenues of inquiry. And I certainly think this documentary is guilty of that. Having Richard Turley, there appears to be kind of a friendliness almost between, whoever produced this thing and the LDS Church. I believe they, helped them in acquiring certain pieces of footage. Just, all in all, the Mormon Church really has nothing to worry about this one. It's faith affirming, essentially. Okay, so let's take one particular example. Mark Hofmann, the forger, his kind of crowning achievement was, probably the white salamander letter. And although that letter is discussed, the content of that letter is barely discussed. The documentary does spend quite a bit of time talking about the way Mark Hofmann was able to kind of physically produce his various forgeries and make them appear old. He even, developed his own kind of techniques for achieving that. The ink he used, getting old paper, making paper kind of seem more weathered and worn, all that kind of stuff. Very impressive stuff to make these documents seem believable, because of course they really did dupe people that were supposedly experts in the field. It was even, one of these documents was even at one point sent off to the FBI, who themselves verified the authenticity of this document. The master forger, which Hofmann certainly seems to have been, is not just the art of making stuff look old. The content is also really important. It needs to be, historically believable. It needs to kind of fit in to the historical context as it is understood. It needs to be, within the parameters of historical plausibility. And, the white salamander letter certainly does that. The letter even kind of throws in some erroneous chatter about money to make it seem more convincing. So really everything in the letter, I think, seems believable, apart from the white salamander itself, which there is no precedent for that I can see. The letter talks about seer stones, how, Joseph Smith kind of put seer stones in hats, and the words for the Book of Mormon would appear on the stones. And, of course, this is before, apologists for the church openly talked about seer stones as being, integral to the production of the Book of Mormon. It talks about Joseph Smith as a treasure seeker, kind of being led by certain spirits to find various pieces of treasure. There's the whole concept of these spirits kind of toying with treasure seekers, doing the whole, this is where the treasure is. Oh, maybe it's not. Oh, it's gone. That whole thing. It lingers in particular on the treasure seeking of coins. And it says that, Martin Harris, after some, treasure seeking escapade, discovered a coin or something like that. And, because of this, that, validated the powers of Joseph Smith. And therefore, what Joseph Smith said about the golden plates must be true. That's what he took as validation that the Book of Mormon is true. So what I find interesting about all these individual claims is that they're all ostensibly true, right? Or at least they're kind of within the realm of truth, apart from the white salamander thing. And, I think that is what makes the Salamander letter, an impressive forgery, is that it all, resides, within the parameters of what is historically plausible. And, I would go so far as to say that the version of history that the Salamander offers us, and, of course, to use British parlance, I'm not saying anything other than the letter is complete bollocks, right? It is a forgery. It was produced by Mark Hofmann. I'm not debating that. But nonetheless, the version of history that the Salamander letter offers us is actually closer to the truth than the version of history that is offered to us by, through official channels, by the LDS Church itself. I find the letter's focus on coins in particular quite interesting. The documentary talks about how, when Mark Hofmann was younger, he collected antique coins, and he, developed various techniques to pass off these antique coins as, even more impressive to collectors than they actually were. Altering them in some way to make collectors want to get their hands on them. And there's also a treasure-seeking story that is told to us in the documentary. We're told that, when Mark Hofmann was younger, he went out treasure-seeking with his friends. But kind of, preempting this little escapade, he had, gone out prior and buried a jar of coins, which he then makes a big, kind of drama of discovering. Now, to anyone that's familiar with, Mormon history, this whole thing, screams a direct parallel with Joseph Smith himself. But of course, the documentary doesn't draw out that parallel. You would need to know about Mormonism to see that. Someone who sets out to deceive people, someone that delights even in duping people, a treasure seeker, someone who is egotistical, someone that believes that the means ultimately justify the ends. And there's one point in the documentary in which Mark Hofmann is quoted by his friend, the, Aleister Crowley impersonator guy, and he says, if something seems to be true and is accepted as true, then it is true. And according to the historian Dan Vogel, that's more or less how Joseph Smith thought about the Book of Mormon. He created the Book of Mormon to seem true, to appear true, to be believable, and, in as far as people then did believe in it, it was useful for them. It helped them, come to Jesus. It's an obvious parallel, and yet, the documentary doesn't make it. A final example of this is towards the end of the third episode. It talks about Mark Hofmann's kind of aspiration to produce the 116 lost pages from the Book of Mormon, which would have been, transcribed by Martin Harris. And so the first forgery would have been able to validate the second forgery. But again, no kind of context is given for this. You wouldn't know how significant the 116 pages were unless you were familiar with Mormonism. Of course, the 116 pages represents kind of like the holy grail of Mormonism. And yet, this is not discussed. The significance of these pages is, only alluded to. I think the documentary is clever in that it kind of suggests, particularly in the first episode, that this whole saga, rests upon some kind of deep-seated scandal within the church. But then, of course, ultimately, we learn that the whole thing rests upon the shoulders of one ingenious and murderous individual, Mark Hofmann, who, to this day is in prison behind bars. So I suppose all my little niggles are about, the lack of context given there's not a lot of discussion about Mormonism. And on one level, you could say, yeah, but it's not about that. It's a true crime documentary. It's about, Mark Hofmann and the crime he was able to commit. And that's fair on one level, but, it really is about Mormonism. It's set within the context of Mormonism. So I just think it would have been, I would have found it more interesting, at least, if it just spent more time unpacking that Mormon context for, the general audience, right? Who, at the most will have seen, like, the Book of Mormon musical. And that's probably, all the prior knowledge about Mormonism that they're bringing to the table. I think what I probably found most interesting about the documentary, and I suppose this is indicative of most true crime documentaries, is the glimpse we're given into Mark Hofmann's mind. How he thought about religion, how he thought about individuals, believing he was able to, orchestrate the hoax he was able to orchestrate, and, believing his own hype to the extent to which he was willing to even murder to protect that. And alongside that, all his kind of various skills, his ability to deceive the lie detector test, all that kind of stuff. Okay, well, there you go. That's a kind of random spattering of my thoughts about this new documentary. Cheers for watching. Please do like this video. Thanks in particular to my Patreon supporters. If you are new to my channel, I more or less do talk about, Mormon stuff. I actually have a huge playlist up there, which you can check out, with loads of episodes about, various aspects of Mormonism, Mormon history, Mormon theology, and so forth. So, please do check that out. Cheers again, and I will see you in the next one.